Well, another one of these videos, and specifically on the topic of how to deal with bullying, boycotting, lobbying in different types of organizations, including churches, and specifically how to deal with bullies. Okay, and I hope that this will give you a few methods, techniques. I call them tactics, strategic tactics to deal with it. Okay, so experience, just quickly, you should have already seen my video on my introduction about my background in churches. Watch that first, I'll give you a background. But additionally, I've had an additional, on top of that, I've already had training and 20 years of experience in nonprofits, lots of nonprofits at national and international levels, plus small, large businesses and multinational corporations, including conflict management, including negotiations, including giving constructive feedback, team building, teamwork, lots of experience in many different roles and doing many different organizations, okay, and different countries. With experience with working with nationalities, many different nationalities as well for the past 20 plus years, okay? And have also worked in lead generation, direct sales, so have studied negotiation techniques, sales techniques, and turning prospects into customers, which influences a lot of this. And have worked in politics as well, including government politics and strategic corporate politics. So a lot of this overlaps with what I'm going to talk about here. The first thing that's important to see is there's good politics and bad politics. And people say, oh, I don't want to be involved in politics. Well, that's not true. There is good politics and there's bad politics. And the unfortunate thing is that most people have not worked in governments, so they don't know how good politics works and where people can separate the task, the activity, and the person's agenda and what the person needs to do for their mandated to do, and from the person. And actually, governments, and I've done things where you can eat with people at lunch, even if you're opposing views. You can still meet with them and talk with them and know them personally, but not get involved and try to separate that from the actual task of the job. Okay. So in life, especially in churches, you have to affect the fact that council members can't say, well, we don't want to be in politics. That's not true. It's just life. It's part of life. You need to wake up and learn that that's how it happens. And people have their agendas. You get to deal with them. And do not think that you can just avoid the problems and that problems do not happen. They do not occur. The churches. Just go read 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, both of those books, about 5 times from the beginning to the end, and then you realize that it's always been around. So you just have to learn how to deal with it. That's what Paul did. Okay. So some background concepts I want to go through here, because I'm trying to keep this under 10 minutes, is some background concepts. Two main background concepts, or 3 to keep in mind, is that bullying is usually done by email. Okay, so usually it's in a traceable form. It's to influence people in certain types of ways. It's usually done by not talking to people first. It's usually done, a person invents something in their mind, they're dealing with it, they live in their own mind stuff, and then they write it down on paper, and they don't check it out, cross-validate it by talking to other people, even with other people, and doing that, they send off the email. Even if they've hovered over that and read it 5 times, they've not really checked all the sources and different views, and not really checked that it's really true what they've invented, okay? And ignore the Bible, okay? Another thing is that we need to remember that email is a very dangerous thing. So if you go and read chapters 1 to 3 of the book of James, and you change the word tongue to email, we will be launched into the 21st century directly, as reality will be catapulted into the new century if we just change that simple word. So that's an important thing. Email is destructive. It should only be a follow-up activity. It should not be a discussion means, okay? You never use the primary means of discussion. And I've always said that for several years. Another second point is that bullying is usually done from a single view perspective. You need to keep that in mind. People are usually consistently just harping on it from a single view. So you need to understand how to think in that mentality of that single view they're dealing with. And another third point that I think is important for a background is watch out for covert lobbying and boycotting, where people do things to stand off and do things to lobby against and boycott against things and doing lobbies against other people covertly. And then look at when you have covert and overt, so that's hidden and open bullying, because you have both types, okay? And usually the open bullying is happening when they have email stuff, but you can have covert under hidden as well, okay? So what are the methods or the techniques, and I call them tactics, of how to counter such bullying? Well, first thing, and the thing that they usually what salespeople learn to do is to study your prospect. Go onto LinkedIn, go onto Facebook, check out the 160 characters that they can do in their Twitter feed, okay? Study out the people. There's plenty of online information about people. Study them out. I've done that usually when I have to get to know people, and I study who they are. What's their job, what's their activities, all I get. Study them out carefully. Get to know them very well, because you need to know how they think. Are they a binary thinking person? Or do they think multi-levels and processing? You need to understand that, okay? You need to become like a salesperson or consultant that their job is to study out these things in order to analyze it. And actually, it's very similar to even customer escalation experts. What they do is they don't just study the problem that has to be dealt with. They get to study the people they have to deal with who have the problem, okay? Even a technical issue. To put that those escalation fires or crises, okay? So point one is study out the people. Point two is study out the personality types of those people, similar to the kind of the Myers-Briggs personality types. Are they introvert? Are they extrovert? Are they, what type of person are they? Get to know that before you engage in anything in dealing with them, okay? Another example is get to learn the vocabulary, the terminology of their job or their, if they work for an association, get to know the vocabulary and terminology they use, because you'll need to use that, okay? Because what you want to be able to do, and negotiations and conflict management classes teach you this, is to use the same vocabulary from what they're familiar with in the certain way that you need to use it. So if it's a finance person, use the word due diligence. If they're coming from a certain industries, use certain words that they'll be familiar with, okay? And usually I say, I've worked in the telecommunications field and did a degree in telecom, and you have antennas, and you have an antenna that sends signals, and you have an antenna that receives signals, and there's a transmission. And what you need to be is the intended signal and message you want to that it's received and understood. Well, if you're constantly using your own style and things that is not issuing out the signal in the same way, you need to get synchronized. And the way to do it is use the same vocabulary, use the language, use the same type of approach and vocabulary that the person uses when they're sending out their signal to you. Try to understand that and say it back. I've seen it, I've used it, and it works, because then the person gets more engaged and they begin. I'm not saying that it gets easier, I'm just saying that you finally get them understand that you're able to work together and talk together, not work together, you're able to understand each other and then get through where the problems really lie, okay? Stop trying to do it your own way, stop trying to figure out your own way, and say it your own way, say it in the way that they understand it, and then you'll be able to use their language, use their vocabulary, use their lingo. Fourthly, stick to the minimal facts. Study out the resources of the sources of their statements. Are they quoting statements that are quoted correctly from closet articles, or are they kind of making it sound that way? Quote from publicly accessible sources when you can, so people can access it, and stay general as long as you can. Don't get in the trap of digging too deep too quickly. Okay. 5, avoid issuing any statements that develop a conflict against the person. Stick to their actions, stick to their behavior, and speak and write about that, okay? And that helps avoid the personal aspects. And then the last point I want to point out here is how to deal with conversations or chats, interviews, where you're sitting down with people, and I'll call this the FBI investigation, where they come down sitting with notebooks, taking notes, and stopping you at every 30 seconds and asking you what you said. I've been in that. Okay, how to counter that? That can be very psychologically distracting, and the way to get around this, in my experience in doing this, is the following. If you know the people that you're going to talk with, study them out again. Like I said, get to know how they think, get the way they linear and all that. Because usually a person that's going to be sitting there and taking notes while you're talking is a very linear type thinking person. They can only think in a linear way, and you have to go through steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 when you are sitting and going through this discussion. So the way to do it is not let them take notes and not let them to get around it. So and usually a very binary 0-1 kind of thinking person. So my experience in dealing with that is the following. is that if they have this predefined agenda of how you're supposed to have this chat, well, basically they're thinking that you're going to be coming with a PowerPoint presentation, which you're not doing because it's a chat. What I suggest doing is jumping around on topics. Jump around a lot. Don't let them take notes. They'll keep stopping and taking notes, but just keep it so they can't take notes. It just frustrates them. So that doesn't allow them to do their predefined agenda. Okay. This doesn't allow them to think in their binary way. So just don't let them take notes. And don't take notes yourself. That's a dangerous thing. It's good when you get a good memory afterwards, and that helps too. But remind them that it's a chat. Remind them it's a conversation, that this is not a PowerPoint presentation that needs to be accepted or anything, and this is not a case before sitting with the judge for evidence. So the way to do it is, and if you know who they are and you know their vocabulary, you can lead them influence them on the discussion. Try to insert calls for appeal for feeling and types of things. I've seen that, and I've seen it where people didn't work, and because they weren't in their personality at all. But I try to use others where I had to do that. So try to get them to make statements on feelings. See if they can even feel anything, because they need to. When there are problems about discussions of topics and topics that are very dear to them and heart, are they able to see that as just a pure? Are they seeing it as a pure objective thing, or are they able to feel it too and to live through it? If they can't, then you're going to have another level of things you're going to have to deal with, and maybe have to use other techniques. But hopefully, these will be kinds of tactics that allow you to go through such experiences unscathed or less scathed, and to be able to just deal with topics objectively, not to feel it caught into it. I've been able to deal with a lot of things. I just put up the armor and deal with. But of course, I work in corporate politics all the time, so I'm kind of used to good at doing this. But try to use as few of these techniques as much as possible, and that will allow you to be able to be more efficient, at least in dealing with it, and less psychologically affected and impacted.